Hey there, welcome to Grind and Flow. I'm Chuck Moore and happy to bring you my conversation with Americana singer-songwriter Denisha. You may have seen her in the recent CNN documentary, Call Me Country, Beyonce and Nashville's Renaissance. She's also been named an Artist to Watch by NPR, a 2024 CMT Next Woman of Country, and is a member of the music collective known as the Black Opry, which we'll talk more about here in a moment. And just last month, in June of 24, she made her debut on the Grand Ole Opry, the first Black Opry member to do so. I first encountered Denisha's music and her story last fall in a couple of solo acoustic performances at Americana Fest in Nashville. I was instantly taken with her voice, which, cliches be damned, is actually the voice of an angel. And whether or not you give a whit about country music, I think this episode covers interesting universal themes like finding your voice, finding your place and purpose, and how imposing limits on yourself can actually be liberating for an artist. Later in the episode, you'll hear tracks from Denisha's last album, Highways, now available to stream everywhere or purchase at denisha.com. That's DENITIA. Her new single, Back to You, is also out now, with a new album coming soon. So here's my conversation with Denisha, and please excuse a brief rough patch of audio in the middle. It doesn't last long, and we're jumping in here as Denisha recounts an unlikely path from her native Houston to Nashville by way of Brooklyn. And it's in Brooklyn that she shared a living space / studio with other musicians who generously shared their knowledge of the craft of making records. The studio was in the living space?
Oh yes, the studio was in a common area on the first floor. I was in my 20s, so it was a different time. I lived on the floor of that studio actually for a little while, you know, like you do. Yeah, it was something that some of the guys that lived there, they created this studio space. And when I moved into that house, I was like, oh, you guys know how to make your own records? Teach me. And they were like, okay, cool. So I just kind of watched them do it. And that started my journey of learning how to self-record and learning more about the process and how it pertains to how to support my literal and literary voice, my musical voice, and how the studio can be used as an instrument as well. It was a good time.
How do you explain to people, especially those who aren't familiar with the music, the difference between country and Americana?
See, I mean, how do you do that? And that's why I usually include both when I'm describing, because I feel that my music sort of overlaps in both worlds and also overlaps in different people's understanding of what country music is and what Americana music is.
Well, let's try it.
Okay.
Let's give some examples.
Sure. Well, the reason why I use the word country is because I'm heavily inspired by classic country music, all the way from the 60s up to the 90s. That's the music that I grew up on. So I'm kind of like inspired by and taking from those palettes, pedal steel, slide guitars, acoustic guitars, you know, the arrangements of the songs, the way the songwriting is kind of crafted. And I think that some of that older country, the older country genre has now started to become labeled as Americana, as like sort of this umbrella term for music that sounds like classic country or folk or blues. And I think country, as we know it in the zeitgeist at the moment, is a bit more pop leaning. And so it kind of gives way to having these other descriptors for music that sounds or sort of mines from a more classic country sound.
But also I feel like it isn't all about being retro. Do you agree?
Oh, for sure. That's one of the things that I actively am facing away from. Retro music or like a revival of a certain thing, I like to think of it as I'm rooted in classic country music and I'm filtering it through my voice and trying to find ways to even walk forward with that music. I grew up in Texas on the outskirts of Houston. We bounced between a couple of small refinery towns. I grew up on country music. When I was little, that was what I was obsessed with, and it kind of formed my notion of what a great song is. I started writing songs as a teenager. I played different musical instruments growing up, but guitar really spoke to me. That really stuck. I started writing songs, started playing at church, leading the praise and worship at school and experimenting with different genres, trying to find what I like, what I'm into. Then I came to Nashville to go to college. After I graduated college, I promptly got down to the business of making records in this town, writing songs, and searching for what my artistry could lead to.
Eventually, Denisha left Nashville for new artistic vistas in Brooklyn, where she wound up living and working at the Clubhouse, the studio space she mentioned earlier. Denisha formed an R&B indie pop band with some roommates, then toured and recorded, but kept coming back to the homey feel of an acoustic guitar in her hands.
I was collaborating with people and trying to find where I fit. Then in 2020, when the quarantine happened, I just found myself reaching for something that felt tangible, something that felt real to me. And I wanted to strip away all sort of extra production or artifice, be more direct with communicating my story. And I found myself reaching for something that felt like home, something that felt real. And I started to re-immerse myself in the country music that I grew up on. Started to see what had been happening in country music for the last 10 years as I was on a different journey. And I started writing my record, my first Americana record, Highways. My friend Brad Allen Williams and myself collaborated on this record. He produced the record. He helped me finish some songs. We wrote some songs together for it. We made the record almost completely remotely because of the quarantine at the time.
Right.
So the times that we were in person were to track the vocals, and he was in a different room, I was in a different room. And that's how we made this album. And Brad was in his house with, his tour schedule had been completely annihilated by the quarantine, and he just created these sounds in his apartment. And I was like, I want to make something that feels pure and just the essentials. And we had been writing songs together off and on for 10 years. We've been friends for a long time. And every time we would get together and write a song, I'd be like, dude, this feels like a country song. And we would kind of produce it in this other kind of way, right? So in 2020, when I texted him, I said, dude, let's just make some country music. That's what I've always really wanted to do. Now feels like a great time. I don't know where the world is going. I don't know what's happening to life. And that's how we made Highways.
Wandered off from here to Houston, looking for a place that I can call my own. The city fit right for a while, like a cloud lost in the melted snow.
So I went up to the Hudson Valley in New York for a little while, lived on a bunch of land, and I started to miss the music community. I started to miss being immersed, and I was trying to find, where's my place? And I felt like Nashville was calling me back home. So I moved back to Nashville about a year ago, and that was after linking up with the Black Opry and doing some tours with them. And now I'm back in Nashville, and I feel that it was ultra necessary for me to go on that journey, that evolution, so that I could come back with a more definitive direction and a vision for who I want to be as an artist. And so that's how I'm here.
So tell me about the Black Opry.
The Black Opry is, it's a collective of Black artists doing country, Americana, folk, blues, roots music, kind of at large. When I made my record Highways and I started putting out some singles, somehow in my research I heard about this group, the Black Opry, and they'd been doing some shows and there were some different artists involved. I didn't know much about it except for that, and I thought it was very exciting and really cool. And then that fall of 2022, I guess, so yeah, something like that, Holly and Tanner, who run the Black Opry, I saw them kind of talking back and forth in the comment section of one of my Instagram posts. And then Holly reached out and said, hey, we love what you're doing. We'd love to get you on some shows. And they reached out and asked me to come play a leg of shows on the East Coast. And I did. And just from the moment I met the artists that were on that tour, Roberta Lee, Julie Williams, and Tay Lewis. From the moment I met them, I knew that the Black Opry was onto something really special. It seems very timely and something that was needed. It's like a gentle mobilizing of Black artists who are doing music that is considered niche for Black artists, but to really be in the know is to know that Black people were highly involved in the creation of country music. Black people have always been in the audience of country music. I think that the creation of Black Opry and the origin of it was just very timely a few years ago as people started to want to face this conversation about race and the culture of country music.
So recent news, recent announcement about the Grand Ole Opry. Tell me about that and what that means to you as part of that tradition.
Yes, I'm going to be making my debut at the Grand Ole Opry on June 29th of this year, and I'm still so blown away for the invitation, and being a part of the fabric of country music means so much to me. I mean, I'm almost getting emotional here. And playing at the Grand Ole Opry is a rite of passage, and it is kind of a stamp of affirmation, of saying, like, you are a part of this legacy. And that's what I want to do, is make music that is a part of the canon of music, and country music specifically. So it just means the world to me. I'm over the moon excited to get on that stage and be in the circle.
Are you the first Black Opry performer to be on the Grand Ole Opry?
So it seems. It seems that I am the first Black Opry artist. Yeah, and that's a thing that I'm also excited about. I kind of have two minds about it. Like, I'm very excited for me as an artist and knowing my journey that I've come through and finding myself in this music and feeling very much at home here and feeling like this is where I need to be. So as just for myself, like, I'm so excited for this opportunity, and I'm also excited for what it represents for my community, for my friends, for my family, that we will all be in that building that night and we'll share that milestone together. I'm just really excited to share that with my community.
So going back to your childhood, being raised around this music,
Right.
who are some of your heroes and some of the core songs that are like in your DNA?
For sure. Some of my heroes from growing up are George Strait, Reba McEntire, Trisha Yearwood, Dwight Yoakam, Martina McBride. Randy Travis is a big one that was a big favorite of mine growing up and has really stuck with me my whole life, and I've really gone back and like referenced a lot of his songwriting. I really love Randy.
What are some key songs?
So a song that I love of Randy Travis is Deeper Than the Holler. I love that song. It's just such a beautiful, like, pastoral love song. It's very like descriptive, but it also is so pop and so catchy at the same time. Another song that I feel is definitive is Amarillo by Morning by George Strait. I just love the lonesome sound of that one, and I really like the character song nature of it. It's like, you know, he's a rodeo man, like singing about his life as a rodeo man. It really like puts me in that picture. I feel like I'm watching a movie when I listen to that song. I also wanted to name another big influence and a hero of mine. Garth Brooks has left a stamp on my soul for the rest of my life.
I know time won't lie when I'm moving on.
You know, when I'm writing songs, I oftentimes see a still picture. I like to think of it as like a vignette from a film, and I try to write to it. And when I hear a song like, "It's the night that the lights went out in Georgia," it takes me through. It's like a novel in a 3.5 minute song, and it like engages my imagination because I'm creating these characters. I can see what they look like. It goes deeper than just sentiment. It's like also very descriptive and telling a story, and it leaves a lot for the imagination, and I really like that.
Tell me about your process, like you said, when you're trying to paint that picture.
Sometimes when I'm writing alone, songs will just come to me through the day, going to the store, driving on the freeway. Songs will come to me and I'll record them in my voice memo on the phone or something. And so that's just sort of like music just bubbling up constantly. But I also intentionally sit down and write often. When I'm in my writing season, I'm writing every day. I'm just getting up, I say, these are the hours I'm gonna write, and I'm writing songs. And so sometimes I'll be listening to records or something will inspire me, and I'll be like, oh, I wanna write something that reminds me of. Or, oh, I have an idea, I wanna sit down and write to that idea. So it happens in different ways, but there's definitely a lot of intention behind sitting down to write, sitting down to finish a song, and also what I want a song to communicate. There's a delicate balance between letting the song tell me what it wants to be, and then also me going into it with some intention. So my record Highways, I wrote some of those songs completely by myself, and then I would take them to my collaborator, Brad, and I would say, what do you think about this? Or like, hey, I kind of think this needs like some different changes. Like, what do you hear? And then there were times where we would just show up on the Zoom and be like, okay, what do you want to write? And I would have like a little piece of an idea here and there, and we'd kind of piece it together. For my new record that's coming out, there were times when we said, we've always wanted to write a song like ... or we always wanted to write this kind of song. And we've got these lists, we've got these documents that we share together, and we're texting, you know, Brad and I have just a rich texting conversation about music because he's such a brilliant musician and artist himself, and also knows a lot about the history of music and how to make records.
Nobody wants to be alone at the end of the night.
Do you have to limit maybe the crayons in your box that you use? Like, oh, wow, this might be too indie pop. I'm gonna have to pull that back in, put a farm in it, put some grass. Do you feel you have to give yourself guardrails?
That's a really great question, Chuck, because I actually feel that when I was making music before I like found my home in Americana and country music, that I was constantly trying to push past the country in me. So being here now in this space and writing in this general genre, I feel free because I feel like country music is so in my blood and in my bones that's just the way I write. I can't help it. That's just the way that I write, and that's the way that I think about music. I'm finding that like my journey as an artist, I've always been, you know, referred to as genre bending or genre melding or blending all these different things. And I think I've actually found a lot of liberation and a lot of freedom in saying, nope, this is what I do. And those confines give me so much more freedom because there's only so many things to choose from. And so that it's not like this infinite kind of like, well, we could put some theremin on here or whatever. It's like, no, a theremin doesn't belong. Or like, oh, you put some auto-tune on your vocals? That doesn't belong. That's not what we're doing. I feel like more than ever, like my vision for how I want to communicate and how I want this music to sound and what I want it to be rooted in is clearer than ever. And it's because I'm inspired by the classic country tradition.
So speaking of the country tradition, a conversation we had earlier off mic, what is country? Like you're talking about limits and limitations, but what is country and how do you push it so you're doing something that someone hasn't already done before?
Totally. I think country music means something different to lots of people because what is the answer to that? But for me, I can only really answer for myself. Country music is about the truth. And like, for me, it's about the truth that I experience or the truth that I observe. Then it's also about stories. It's about relaying life experience. And something that I really love about music and country music specifically is how the stories that we're telling in this music, it's important who it's coming from and what your identity is, but it's also transcendent of identity and politics and where you're from. And I think the duality of like it being important whose voice it is, and also it's important that that voice can transcend all that we are, you know, and those human stories connect us and tie us together. And I think there are a lot of threads there. So country music to me represents all of these stories of life, love, loss, family, country life, urban life, just whatever your truth is. And I think you can tell those stories in country music. And I'm excited about the potential that we have right now as country artists, because there's like a moment right now where things are being a little redefined. Like, what is country? Who can make country? Who's allowed here? Who's not? And it's a really interesting time, and I think it has the potential to be really illuminating and actually a really beautiful future for this genre.
Right. There's also, I think, there's a directness in certainly country writing. You have to work a little harder to be clear about what you're saying, because rock and pop, that didn't quite make literal sense, but I can get away with it.
Oh, sure. Because yes, there is a directness about country music, because to me, it's like if the song stands up with just a vocal and a guitar, and it really holds and it really communicates, then that's some good country music. And then I think also for me, the palettes and the sort of instrumentation can be varied, but I think there are some important staples. Acoustic guitar is one of them for me. Pedal steel is something that I've always loved my whole life, and I'm really excited because there's pedal steel all over my next record.
I feel like it's an otherworldly instrument.
It really is.
So many layers.
It really is. And, you know, I feel like the banjo is integral to country music. Mandolins, when you started talking about mandolins, yeah, I think it is just about directness and truth.
On the sweet tea in Carolina, all the sun that comes to dry up all the rain.
What is hard about what you do, and how do you power through?
I am a fully independent artist. And I think some of the challenges are in all of the many tasks and all of the many aspects that there are to being an artist and being a full-time artist and making sure my career is sustainable. All the while, my primary concern is making music that I love, that connects with people, while I'm being authentically myself. And so I stay focused on that. The biggest challenge is just juggling all the things that go into my presentation as an artist, the way that I'm connecting with people in public, online, the performances, you know, putting a band together, managing tour dates, managing my digital outputs, so social media engagement, on top of, you know, the thing that I really want to do, which is just to be creative. So I think it can be a real challenge to just day to day get everything done in the name of the music. But what always brings me back is that I love to make music. I'll do whatever it takes to keep doing that and to keep connecting with people.
So what does self-care look like to you?
Self-care is a day off. I try to take a day off every week.
No guitar, no writing, or
Just reading a book, drinking some tea, literally taking care of myself, going to the park, just taking a break, because my mind and my heart are always in the music. I'm always in the job of it and also the artistry of it. And so I think it's important to take time off to just exist as a human. And it's also important for productivity to let my ideas kind of like marinate in my subconscious while I'm like doing something else. So self-care is taking time off when I can, spending time with friends and loved ones, and being in nature is like a really important thing for me.
what do you tell younger musicians starting out?
Yeah, I do come in contact with a lot of younger musicians emerging in different ways, you know, at different levels. And I think some of the primary things that I try to emphasize with people is like however you can, like, write the best songs you possibly can. I know when I was coming up, I don't think I understood fully the way that I do now, the power of co-writing and the power of seeing what I can bring to the table, what you can bring to the table, and how can we write the best song possible. And also just practice. I think that because part of being an artist now is there's so much marketing that has to be done and so much social media marketing, and I think it's great. I think it's an awesome way to get to your fans, but it kind of shifts the like day-to-day life for an artist, and I think that it's important that we don't forget, really focus on your craft. Sing every day, sing all the time, play all the time, and get better. Find people that are doing what you want to do, figure out how they got there, aspire to that and study them and figure out what that looks like. So I think it's like having an open mind at the same time as being very concerned with what is your voice in the world and what music do you want to contribute.
Denisha, thank you so much.
Thank you. This was
Thank you.
great. I
This is
appreciate
awesome.
it, Chuck.
Thank you.
Yeah, that thing about artists having to spend so much time of their day-to-day managing social media, I'm hearing from a lot of musicians and other professionals as well. Social media, how do we find time to do the thing while burning calories talking about the thing? Anyway, on the purely artistic side of things, I continue to mull over Denisha's take on the duality of finding your unique voice while still creating work that transcends identity and politics. Certainly, so much music I connect with has that magic overlap of specificity and universality. What do you think about any of this? I'd love to hear from you. DM me on Instagram at Grind and Flow Official, spell out and. Please follow the podcast there. You can also subscribe and comment on YouTube on the Grind and Flow Official channel. Also, please leave a rating and review and follow us on your favorite podcast app. Until next time, see you soon.